Hi, Paulie here. So, I want to share one of my great loves. This was the game that meant most to me all through my sort of teen 20s. This was our absolute go-to. Lit up our world, loved the system. This was the thing we kind of played more than anything else. And it was my old friend, Runequest by Chaosium. I do have my old first edition. This is second edition. Second edition is my favorite. We'll go into why. So, Runequest. So, this came out from Chaosium. Fairly early game, actually. It came out in the late 70s. And it broke entirely new ground at a time when D&D ruled the roost. And D&D has a very abstract system, which comes very much from early sort of Donald Featherstone style skirmish games. Something else we'll go into later. But Runequest really kind of lit up our world. So, Runequest was very, very vague on setting. But that was kind of, we liked that. It was a Bronze Age, kind of Iron Age, ancient Greek, ancient Roman kind of feel to it. It was crested helmets, it was bronze armor, it was, you know, short swords, it was hopalon shields and everything. They were very, very sort of had this lovely Mediterranean Iron Age geist to it, which was fantastic. So, immediate departure from the medievally Tolkien-esque world of D&D right there. It was its own world. It had made its own background. It had its own mythos. Now, there were a bunch of guys who'd obviously made their own board games and so on this. None of this came through with this. All we got was this. It had a, there's a map in there of this area and there's some vague historical things and that was all we needed. Didn't need anything more. But the world set up its own races and its own histories and so on. Now, at its core, this was this radical departure. This was where the D100 game systems came from. So, it decided that it was going to be skill-based, not level-based, and what you would have is a system where your skills are expressed as a number, and you've got to roll that number or less on percentile dice in order to have the skill work. Quite a leap at the time. If you rolled very, very low, if you got down into the lowest 5% of your overall chance of success, that's a critical. For weapons and so on, if you've got 20% of your basic number, that's a impale or a crush or a slash or whatever. So what you did was you generated a character and your characteristics really affected everything in play. Skills were broken up into things like manipulation and perception and so on, and you would go through and given what your characteristics were, which was still essentially 3d6 characteristics, but in this version there was this quite simple set of charts, and effectively in the 13 to 15 branch, 16, 17, 18 and so on, you would get bonuses of plus 5, 10 or 15 or 20% to particular sorts of skills. Always done in chunks of 5, so it's easy to figure out. So if I've got great dexterity and I'm fairly strong, I'll get bonuses to manipulation, which coincidentally will be the same bonuses for melee fighting. If I'm quite intelligent and so on, I will get bonuses to my perception-based skills. If I'm quite smart and I'm quite dexterous, I will get bonuses to all of my sort of stealth-based skills. There was a lovely extra characteristic which was power, which is spiritual power, the force of spirit within you. Now, it's very useful because having this thing, as you cast spells, it costs you points from your power, which will regenerate. High power, good, more magic. However, having high power meant that things tend to notice you. So, yes, I've got high power, but it affects my stealth skills because, you know, people can kind of, sense my magic power. So, different species and so on, which changed all of the characteristics. They got their own things. So, humans, obviously. There were elves, and the elves in this original version were essentially, you began to figure out they're listed as a plant species because there were some other groups that sort of despised elves, trolls and so on, and you get these kind of geases. I was like, you got to eat vegetables once a week just to, you know, piss off the elves. elves count as a vegetable. So there was some fun with that. Ducks, which I will love forever as a character species. Anthropomorphic ducks, I loved them. Janelle Jaquez loves them still. And this kind of brought a base note of humour. And this is one of the things that we loved about this game, because heroic ethos, kind of the Greco-Roman crested helmets, you know, you'd be there with your gladius and having a great fight, but it also had a charm to it. They brought out several books. There was a book called Foes, and as you went through Foes, there were some beautiful illustrations all through it. The problem, by the way, with Runequest compared to D&D was D&D can use cookie cutter monsters. You can just have goblin. It's just the only thing to prepare a goblin is I just roll a random dice for how many hit points it's got. That's it. Because characteristics affect everything, the monsters are all characters too. So the book had the dice to roll up the characteristics of the monsters, and it had an average one done. If it rolled average, this is how all of its skills and so on would run. And that includes damage bonus, because if you are very large, size is a characteristic, and you're very strong, well, that's where massive extra damage comes from. That's why being smacked up the side of the head by the claws of a polar bear is somewhat different from being smacked up the side of the head by the paws of a house cat. The strength bonus will do you in. So you have an average one, but you got these books like Foes, where these very, very primitive early computer days, someone has written a computer program in BASIC, and they've just run out 100 of every monster. And so you get one, so it had rolled, you know, badly, rolled great, had a huge distribution of things, so lovely thing. But the drawings in this were just charming. They had a sort of a simplicity and a humour to them, which was just infused the whole game. So with this very limited world information, you stepped out there and you played. It had a wonderful magic system. Again, we've come from Dungeons and Dragons, which has this over-the-top magic system where you start off as a magic user, and the first things you can do is wave a hand and make a room full of people fall asleep. Kind of strange, crazy spells like Unseen Servant, where, you know, some kind of elemental can, you know, do your dishes and clean your room for you, or, you know, drop your opponent's trousers. And it would eventually go up to summon Meteor Swarm and Raising the Dead and all these sorts of things. Right. Not in this Runequest. Pure, unadulterated, gorgeous old Runequest, spirit magic. Everyone can use it. Every goblin, every creature has the ability to use it. Most people will go out there and get some. And what you do is you get these spells, and the spirit magic, you can use some of your power, expend it temporarily, and make a spell effect happen. So combative wise, if you're a character, you get things like Blade Sharp, and all these other numerical spells which are measured. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 was the value. That's the amount of power it costs to cast them. You learned a spell up to that level, and this would add to the damage of the sword. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But people could put protection spells, which raised by the same numerical value their armor. You could get disruption, which could do little things, and there were some general effect spells. Most of these are wonderful, just very simple low-level utility spells. But if you've got them and the other side doesn't, then you're at an advantage. So the resource management of using your power characteristic was very, very important. Now, what you got as far as magic went was religion. Beautiful book came out, Cults of Prax, wonderful. These were religions that your characters could follow, and to train in these spells, and indeed to train in skills, cost you money. One of the main things that you're doing as you go out on ventures and collecting money is you then run back and you're expending these for training in various skills and magics. But the different religions had some things that they did more cheaply. If you belong to a solar cult that worships the sun, then a lot of the kind of light and, you know, movement spells will be half price. And these guys, well, these guys use arrows and bows and so on, and spears, because, you know, they evoke the sun's rays. So spear and bow and archery training would be cheaper. So ask not what you can do for your religion. Grab the book, flick through, and ask what bargains your religion can offer you. So that's what you'd do. You'd run around, oh, hang on. If I see these guys. I've got, I want to be a swordsman. I may do this and that. There was a sort of a swordsman god, Humacht, and the Humakti worshipping duck became an ongoing gag that you'll find everywhere. These kind of little short, quacky sword ducks were great. So, in these religions, you could become a rune priest. If your power got to 18 and you met certain skill requirements, you could go from just being like a lay member to being a full member of a cult, which gets the full benefits and so on, or you could become a priest once your experience got high enough. And with that, you could permanently sacrifice power points to gain access to a higher level of spells, and these are kind of more mystic. But again, you haven't got a ton of them and you have to work for them. Everything was worked for, which is what we really liked. And again, these are very specific to the religion that you're in. They'll have these rune spells that you could use. There was a general list as well, but these were great utility spells again. You know, they don't turn the universe upside down, but they're great stuff. You could become a rune lord if you got skills up very, very, very high. You did need you need 15 power, but essentially this was the warrior path. You could become these rune lords, and that meant that you could get iron weapons, because iron's very rare here, and they give you things, and so this was the thing that you're trying to build up to if you're a warrior sort. There were knowledge gods, by the way, where being a rune lord or rune priest, these things aren't about your killing and hurting and maiming capacity. They're about the knowledge you have, they're what you know. There's a healing religion where you weren't allowed to hurt anybody. That's the oath you take. So you heal people, bad guys, good guys, and it's very, very nice. I like that. So what you got was an allied spirit that would be attached to you if you're a rune lord and rune priest, and you could use that spirit's power to fuel your own spells. They brought in spirit combat, which is wonderful, so you could have like disembodied guardians of places, and you could find yourself locked in spirit combat, which was a power against power contest where you're smashing away at each other's power. You could end up with your soul basically beaten down and kicked out of your body, and the spirit takes over. Whee! We've had some fun there. Oh, we've had fun with this game system. The combat, that was what sort of lit up our teenage worlds, because this used a hit location system. So you get in combat, you have strike rank. Depending on how tall and what your size is and so on, also the length of weapon, it would determine who gets first hit in a combat. And then you roll your percentage skill. It was active, you're involved. You rolled a hit, the guy then rolls to parry it. If it gets past the parry, then you roll the hit location to see where it hits. This was a game that brought in this concept that weapons do damage and armor absorbs the damage. So I then roll for the damage once I've figured out where the hit's landing. I add in stuff for my strength bonus. The armor absorbs damage from that, unless it's a critical hit, in which case it avoids the armor. And the locations all have hit points. When that location goes to 0 hit points, that location ceases working. If it goes way below, like multiples of the basic, it can be severed off. So graphically, particularly as a horrible teenager, it's like, oh yeah, it's like, yeah, I've hit him in the head, and it's like, yeah, it's double his head's hit points. Like, yeah, his head's off. Oh, his arm's off. You could lose limbs left, right, and center in this thing. There were healing spells that could, bring that back, unless it was something that you really needed, like your head or your chest or your abdomen. So it was way more visceral. It was what we liked. It was very visual, and your character engagement was in there. You're not just kind of abstractly rolling a d20, you're rolling to hit. You've got dodge abilities and so on came into it. You had a defense. In this version, you had a basic defense characteristic, little bonus, and that went off the other guy's chance of hitting you. Nice bit of abstraction there. So if you're a ducker, dodger and weaver and you're quite good at that, the other guy's got less of a chance of landing a blow on you. Your parrying and so on abilities are separate to that. So this was great. The different weapons all had their different thing. The different religions brought in different things. So trolls and so on, they were, in their mythology, they came from darkness and so on, and so they were tied up to like clubs and impact weapons and these sorts of things. So that's what they used. Some of the more some of the other cults, you know, swords, what they use, spears were what they used. So, you know, you got this kind of taste and flavour to it. All these wonderful little races and so on. So it set up a world, it was visual, it had its own magic system, it had these wonderful religions, it just came to life. It was fantastic. We had so much fun with this game. It was just wonderful. You know, thousands of anecdotes from this thing, and they're all good. But, so they had a winner. They had a real winner. As it first came out, you got your Ballastor's barracks and so on. You got all these lovely little basic adventures that they did. Books like, you know, Militia and Mercenaries, which had different. Again, that wonderful basic program was done to run out lots of different, you know, foot soldiers that you might find as guards and so on. Trolls and Trollkin and Creatures of Chaos and all these sorts of things. These were the basic books. So, but then something happened and Runequest went off on a journey. You know, quite frankly, the company became way more interested in Call of Cthulhu, and they just kind of dumped Runequest out in the wilderness. So those who loved it continued playing the original, but look, versions came out through all sorts of crazy publishers, and it's pretty much not worth going through that journey. They didn't bring anything to the mix. There were a few interesting things that came out, like there was some supplements for Runequest that came out that weren't in that that heroic Greek kind of world. It was quite strange. Whereas, okay, someone's using this for different things, and this was an adaptable system that you could use for virtually anything. Stormbringer and Elric came out that used sort of the bones of that system, but didn't have the hit location and obviously their own worlds and so on. So it provided a jumping off point for so many games. So let's scroll forward. We've had some games come out. Mongoose and so on started doing their own versions of this, and there's been Eon Games and so on have done Mithras, and the license to RuneQuest sort of came back from these chaps. Mithras is very good, by the way. Mithras was someone's attempt to bring out like a modernized version of RuneQuest. Unfortunately, there is a habit that these games have of trying to make the combat system more engaging by bringing in tactical choices that you can make. And I have to say, as an actual sword fighter, this irritates me. Because you can walk in and go, I will attempt to disarm him. That is not how any of this works, ladies and gentlemen, I assure you. As your training gets higher, you have a bag of tricks that you can draw from, but opportunities just open for a microsecond and you don't pre-plan it. He's slightly off balance, I can throw him. He's going backwards, damn it, I'm going to Tayatari him, whatever. These are just things that open. But this is done as a games mechanic to try and engage you. Let's fast forward to very, very recently. Ta-da! It's back again. Here we go. This is the new RuneQuest. It's bold, it's beautiful, it's colour. It jumps off less from this, I have to say, and more from Mithras. So, first off, guys, it's great to see you back. Thank you for keeping it alive. Thank you for bringing it back into the fold. This is a game that should never have been sent on that wandering journey. It's one of the true great pieces of role-playing game design. And so many other games owe so much to the things that it absolutely pioneered. So glad to have it back. This is built on a ton of other mythology that has come into that games world as these guys kind of developed their own games, and there's been HeroQuest and all these other sorts of things, but they sort of developed that background. I kind of missed a lot of that journey, as did a lot of the original players, I have to say. A lot of original players of this could care less about HeroQuest, and these were just kind of far off once upon a time things in the setting, but you know, in the HeroQuest this is what it's all about. So what does this bring to the mix? Well, it's more complex. It's beautifully laid out, it's beautifully illustrated. That 5% increments thing, which I found so easy and so simple, is gone. That very simple mechanism that brought in your defense and subtracted from the guy's chance of hitting is gone. What we do have is all these tactical options, which include like dodging rather than attacking and so on. There's some strange choices here, like there aren't so many individual weapon skills. There's kind of a style that you have. And you say you must, I come from this tribe and we've got this style of like sword and bow and lance. So your weapon skill is in that style, and it kind of covers all of those. So, you know, so less niggly, I guess. That's easier bookkeeping wise, but I don't know, maybe you wanted to be more focused on one thing than another, but it means that you're not spreading your skills and your experience over so many tiny little things. It has an amazing character generation system, largely focused entirely on humans. This is like way more human-centric than what Second Ed had kind of become for us. I doubt we would always play parties. There'd be like, there'd be a human used dinosaur salesman, there'd be a kind of a half-pint troll, there'd be a duck, there'd be a pixie, there'd be, you know, a couple of elves, there'd be a dwarf. But this is definitely set up to be quite human-centric. They've tried to be way more Bronze Agey in their whole thing, which does raise some problems. I'll get to that. But you roll for random boons for your character, and you've got this whole kind of experience based on the history for your family. So what happened to your great-granddad, and what happened to your grandfather, and what happened to your parents, and what you were doing until we get to the point of play. And this brings in bits of experience you can have, and so on. So you get this whole kind of thing where you're meshed into the background. And so way more complexity, but way more colour to making the characters. But now it's all tied up with this world that they've set up. And here's where I possibly make enemies, because this has charm. This was ducks and eating elves counts as eating vegetables and crazy antics. And this is a game of living and fighting in a very Bronze Age society that has a history of war and genocide and massive destruction and eco disasters engineered by gods. And, you know, this is like way more hardcore as a setting. Colourful. I will stand on that hill and die and say colourful, but not charming. It's not humorous. That's not what they wanted. They wanted a serious world of adventure. And as such, they've got it. It is a great serious world of adventure, and that's what people like. You know, that seems to be what the modern audience really loves. So, unfortunately, now you've got this kind of political situation where these kingdoms that you were kind of used to bumbling around in, there's been conquests and there's been genocides. Those ducks have been almost wiped out, you know, slaughtered to a man, completely sort of ethnically cleansed out areas. The last few remnants, you know, hunted down like you know, dogs as they flee from the righteous swords of... All right, I'm not sure I wanted the ducks, you know, genocided out almost to extinction, but whatever. That's kind of the feel of it. So it's empires locked in combat, and yeah, there's some, and as such, of course, there's lots of opportunities for adventure and overthrowing people and political intrigue and all these kinds of things. Preserves the same essential combat system, hit locations, weapons do damage, your armor subtracts from the damage, all that's there. All that initial spirit magic and rune magic is in there. There's also a layer of other magic, which is like sorcery, where sorcery is a sort of a skill where you roll to create an effect. I'm not sure it needed a third sort of magic system, but you know, it does bring in a lot more options and it works. And so this is this kind of this is the new world that they've made, which is a lot harsher. There is a ton of material that you can get for this now. There are huge atlases of this entire world and all its cultures. There are enormous resources on the Chaosium website just of world detail for this. Now, other stuff that they brought out, obviously, Gloranthan bestiary. Glorantha is the world. And again, this is beautifully illustrated and beautifully laid out. You know, we've got all the stuff that we had in the original game, and then some. They've added new things. Some of them have been kind of brought out from things that people put in the old supplements and the old adventures. Other things here are new, but it builds the same world, it has the same creatures, it's got some nifty new ideas in it, and of course the presentation is magnificent. So this is a great piece of work. So look, Runequest, I'm very glad it's back, I'm very glad it's alive, but to my mind it's two games. It's kind of two children sprung of the same well of thought, shall we say. Kick-ass adventure, charm, plenty of space for the comedic. Highly kick-ass adventure, political intrigue, not designed for the comedic. Definitely a Bronze Age, Iron Age world locked in warfare. And as such, they both offer you a different gaming experience, I think. They're both living games. The Chaosium site has all of this material out in beautiful hardcover, and the new game is excellent. It's gorgeous. So look, if you haven't played Runequest, it is brilliant. Runequest deserves absolute recognition as this groundbreaking thing that just opened up so many new ideas to role-playing games, particularly in system design, but also it was groundbreaking in its world design, in that it essentially owed very little to anything. It was someone took that heroic Greek and Roman ethos and just rolled it over into a world they created entirely by themselves. It's a wonderful piece of work. I will love Second Ed forever. That's still my personal go-to. So many games, so much good stuff happened there. But the new game is it's out there. It's beautifully laid out. It's beautifully created. It's a great world of adventure. If you've never played Runequest, both are actually well worth looking at. It won't break the bank. If you get hold of, say, the Bestiary and the new Runequest, you can pick this up as well. Get a hold of them, take a look at Runequest. Wonderful to have it back. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more coming out from them. Really glad that they've decided to embrace it as a core system for the sort of revamped Chaosium company. So Chaosium, thank you for many decades of gaming that have just meant so much to me. Everyone, go out and pick up Runequest. Cheers.